On the center stage stands a young man, maybe 25, tall, confident, dressed like a star. But something's different tonight. He isn't holding a mic to perform. He's holding a folded piece of paper, and his hands are trembling. The crowd falls quiet. His voice cracks slightly as he speaks into the mic. This is for her. No name, no explanation, just that. The lights go out. The screen behind him begins to glow. And the entire room, and the woman sitting in the front row, is about to witness something she never saw coming. Before we dive into this unforgettable journey, don't forget to subscribe to SoulTwist Stories, where every story comes with depth, heart, and a twist that stays with you. If you've ever had someone sacrifice everything for you, this story is for you. Stay with us, because how this ends will leave you changed. Her name was Ruth Johnson. She was just 19 when she held her baby boy for the first time. In a hospital bed with no visitors, no baby clothes, and no idea what tomorrow would look like. She had $12 in her bag, and a world that had already turned its back on her. But as she looked into his tiny brown eyes, she whispered, "Don't worry, baby. It's just me and you now. And I promise, we'll make it." Ruth Johnson had always been a quiet girl, the kind who didn't ask for much. The kind who kept her dreams folded neatly like letters in a drawer, private, safe, and mostly untouched. She grew up in a Nigerian-American household where strength was demanded and softness was often misunderstood. Her parents were hard-working immigrants, faithful, disciplined, but not always warm. And when Ruth told them she was pregnant at 19, they didn't cry, they didn't shout. Her mother just looked at her and said, "You've embarrassed us." Her father refused to speak to her. The man who used to hold her hand on the way to church wouldn't even look her in the eye. And just like that, home became a prison with no doors, only cold stares and silent meals. The baby's father? His name was Marcus. He was a college freshman, smooth talker, quick smile, full of empty promises. The moment Ruth told him she was pregnant, he ghosted, blocked her number, disappeared from school. By the time she was 6 months along, she hadn't heard from him in weeks. Her friends started pulling away too. They didn't know what to say. Or maybe, they just didn't want her reality to become theirs. At 7 months pregnant, Ruth stood in her parents' living room, bags packed, belly full, eyes swollen, and heard the words that would echo in her memory for years. "You made your choice. Now live with it." She walked out, alone. No job, no plan. Just a duffel bag with a few outfits, her childhood Bible, and an unborn baby growing inside her who had no idea how hard life had already begun. She cried in a bus shelter that night. Not loud sobs, just soft, exhausted weeping, until an older woman, a stranger, offered her a place to stay for a few nights. That woman's name was Mrs. Della, and she would become Ruth's first answer to prayer. Mrs. Della gave her the basement room in her house. It was cold, damp, but safe. Ruth cleaned her house in return. In the mornings, she swept the porch. In the evenings, she braided Della's grandkids' hair for tips. And on a rainy Wednesday in April, in the county hospital surrounded by strangers, Ruth gave birth to Jordan Emmanuel Johnson. 6 pounds. Quiet. But when she held him close to her chest, he opened his eyes. And she smiled for the first time in months. "You're here," she whispered. "Now I don't have to be afraid anymore." Ruth Johnson didn't make noise when her world fell apart. She wasn't the kind to scream or slam doors. No, when her life broke open, it cracked quietly. She was 19 the day she sat across the dining table from her parents, hands folded on her lap, belly already beginning to show, heart racing beneath her ribs. "I'm pregnant," she said. Just those 2 words. The silence that followed was loud enough to break windows. Her mother, Mama Grace, stared at her as if she were a stranger. "You've embarrassed us," she said coldly, wiping her hands on the edge of her wrapper like the words had stained her fingers. Her father didn't say a word. He simply stood, pushed back his chair, and walked out of the room like she had never spoken. That night, Ruth cried into the edge of her pillow. Not for herself, but for the little heartbeat growing inside her. Because already, this child would come into the world with more rejection than welcome. The man she had loved, or thought she did, had disappeared weeks before. Marcus had been all charm and late-night promises, until she told him about the baby. Then, just like that, he vanished. Blocked her number. Stopped coming to class. Gone. By her third trimester, home no longer felt like home. Meals were eaten in silence. No one asked how she was doing. Her name was spoken less and less. She lived like a tenant in the house she grew up in, until one rainy morning, her mother stood in the hallway and said without blinking, "You made your choice. Now live with it." Ruth didn't cry when she packed her bags. She just folded what little she had, a few thrifted maternity clothes, her old Bible, the baby onesie she bought with her braiding money, and walked out the front door. That night, she sat alone at a bus stop in the pouring rain, 7 months pregnant, shivering in silence. Cars passed. People passed. No one looked twice. She whispered under her breath, "God, please. Just one open door." That door came in the form of Mrs. Della, a widowed grandmother who saw Ruth sitting there and said, "Child, you can't be out here like this. Come on. I got a room. It ain't much, but it's clean." The room was a damp basement space with a creaky bed, a single lamp, and a tiny window that barely let the light in. But to Ruth, it felt like a mansion. In exchange for the space, Ruth helped Della around the house. She cleaned, cooked, braided hair in the evenings to earn small tips. And when the time came, in the early hours of a stormy Wednesday morning, Ruth went into labor in that very room. At the county hospital, with no friends and no family by her side, she gave birth to a quiet baby boy with bright brown eyes and hands that gripped her finger tightly. She named him Jordan Emmanuel Johnson. Jordan for strength. Emmanuel for God with us. She held him close against her chest and whispered with trembling lips, "It's just me and you now. But I promise, we'll make it." She didn't know how. She had no plan, no partner, no money, no support system. But she had Jordan. And from that day forward, he became her reason. Jordan didn't grow up with much. Not the latest toys. Not matching clothes. Not birthday cakes with candles shaped like cartoon characters. But what he did grow up with was presence. His mother, Ruth, was always there. Tired, aching, but there. And somehow, that made everything else feel like enough. From the time he could walk, Jordan learned to stay quiet when mommy was sleeping after a night shift. He learned how to eat cereal without milk when payday hadn't come yet. He learned that the reason mommy's knees cracked when she climbed the stairs was because she cleaned 3 houses a day, every day, just so he could wear a clean uniform to school. At 6, he asked her why her fingers were always bandaged. She smiled and said, "From braiding all these heads so we can keep our lights on." She made it sound like magic. But Jordan knew it was sacrifice. He watched her leave the house before sunrise and return after dark. Watched her soak her feet in hot water and fall asleep sitting up. He saw her turn hunger into jokes. "Let's do a fun fast today," she'd say, when all that was left was rice and oil. He knew better, but he never told her. Sometimes, late at night, he would pretend to be asleep and listen to her. Ruth would sit by the window, talking softly to God. Not angry, not begging, just saying things like, "Keep him strong, Lord. Keep him from the streets. Keep him from thinking I failed him." Jordan never said a word, but he heard it all. There was one winter when she got pneumonia. She kept coughing during the night, so hard it hurt to listen. Still, she went to work every day, wrapped in 2 coats, 1 sock tucked into a torn boot. Jordan, just 10 years old, made her tea before she left in the mornings. Burnt toast and all. He even wrote her notes and stuffed them in her work apron. "You're my favorite person. We'll be rich one day. You're stronger than the moms on TV." She never said it out loud, but those notes, they kept her going. When he was 12, Jordan came home with a bloody lip. Some boys at school had laughed at his shoes, hand-me-downs 2 sizes too big, stuffed with paper. He told them to stop. They didn't. The fight that followed got him suspended. Ruth didn't yell. She didn't raise her voice once. She just walked into his room that night, sat at the edge of the bed, and said softly, "You don't have to prove anything to people who don't know your story." Then she kissed his forehead, her voice breaking. "But don't you ever let this world make you ashamed of where you come from." Jordan never forgot that. In fact, he'd remember it again, 25 years later, in front of thousands of people. But back then, he was just a boy, watching his mother teach him how to be a man without ever raising her voice. By the time Jordan turned 14, the world around him began to shift. Not just the outside world, but the world inside him. There was a restlessness in his chest, an anger he couldn't explain, a heaviness in his shoulders that didn't come from school books, but from watching his mother suffer in silence for too long. He started asking dangerous questions. Why don't we live like other people? Why do you still clean houses for people who look down on you? Why don't you ever get tired of pretending everything's okay? Ruth would answer calmly, not with excuses, but with truth. Because I'd rather sweat for you than let you starve. Because your future is bigger than my pride. Because if I stop now, who's going to make sure you finish? But her answers didn't soothe the fire in his chest. Jordan was angry at the world, at the boys who laughed when he brought free lunch tickets, at the teachers who looked surprised when he aced his tests, at the neighbors who whispered things like, "She tried her best, but that boy's headed for trouble." And for a while, he almost proved them right. At 15, Jordan started hanging out with a crew from 2 blocks over. They had bikes, phones, AirPods, and they didn't care where he came from. They spoke the same language, struggle, and they knew how to flip quick cash, no questions asked. Jordan was smart enough to know it wasn't clean. But when you've watched your mother wipe strangers' floors with cracked hands, fast money feels like freedom. One night, Ruth found a wad of cash in his hoodie. It wasn't the lunch money she gave him. It wasn't from any after-school job. He tried to lie, said a friend owed him, said it was nothing, said she wouldn't understand. But Ruth didn't shout, didn't throw the money in his face. She just sat down at the table, opened her hand, and dropped her keys on the counter. "If you're ready to be grown," she said, her voice trembling, "then pack your things and go. But if you want to stay in this house, my house, then you better remember who sacrificed everything for you to even have a future worth ruining." Jordan didn't speak. Couldn't. He just stood there, a boy who thought he was becoming a man, and realized for the first time in his life, he was breaking his mother's heart. He stayed in his room the rest of that night. And when Ruth knocked the next morning, she found him sitting on the floor. The money was gone. His phone was off. And his eyes were red. All he said was, "I'm sorry." Ruth didn't say, "I told you so." She didn't preach. She just pulled him close and whispered, "I can fight the world, Jordan. But not if I have to fight you too." That was the turning point. Not a perfect one. He still had anger. Still had moments of slipping. But something inside him shifted. He started writing. Not essays. Not assignments. Lyrics. It began as scribbles in the corners of notebooks. Then full verses. Then freestyles. His pain became poetry. His struggle became rhythm. His memories became bars he could spit with fire, but also with feeling. Ruth didn't fully understand the music. She didn't like the beat sometimes. But when she heard him rapping late at night, she never told him to stop. Instead, one day, she left a note on his desk. "If this helps you breathe, then breathe. I believe in you." And just like that, music became his lifeline. After that night, the money, the apology, the silence between them, something changed in Jordan. He didn't just write anymore. He worked. Harder than ever. By 16, he was juggling school, homework, and 2 part-time jobs. A stock boy at the corner store, and dishwasher at a loud, greasy restaurant that smelled like onions and dreams deferred. The money wasn't much, but every dollar he made, he used to build a sound. Not a brand. Not a look. A sound. He bought a second-hand mic with one earbud missing. Turned his closet into a studio. Used a hoodie as soundproofing. Sometimes, Ruth would knock and say, "You okay in there?" And he'd mumble, "Yeah, just recording." What he didn't say was, "I'm telling the world our story. I just hope someone listens." His lyrics were raw. No flexing. No fake chains. Just real lines about real nights. Sleeping in the same bed as his mom because the heat went out. Skipping lunch so she could afford hair grease. Hiding from shame like it was a second skin. He uploaded his first track to SoundCloud at 17. No promo. No cover art. Just a title. Laundry Money. It got 13 plays. 5 of them were from him. But he didn't stop. He dropped another. And another. Each one sharper than the last. More personal. More precise. Ruth never said much about the songs. But every now and then, she'd slide a folded piece of paper under his door. Inside were words she heard him rap. Handwritten. Underlined. With a heart drawn beside them. He saved every one. Then, it happened. 2 years later. A girl named Kayla posted a TikTok of her crying while lip-syncing to one of his tracks. "Mama, don't sleep yet." The caption read, "This song makes me want to hug my mom tighter." Within hours, the comments exploded. Who is this artist? Where can I find the full song? Who hurt him like this? Jordan's phone started buzzing non-stop. Views climbed. Followers doubled overnight. Producers DM'd him. Radio hosts mentioned his name on Instagram Live. He ran into Ruth's room, phone in hand, eyes wide. Mom, I think something's happening." She blinked up from her Bible and smiled like she already knew. "Told you they'd listen." In the months that followed, Jordan's music began to spread. Not because it was perfect, but because it was real. Because every line dripped with truth. And every truth sounded like home. He didn't sign right away. Didn't chase fame. He kept dropping songs independently. Building slowly. And with every check that came in, he stashed it away. Quietly. No chains. No cars. Just a secret promise to himself. If I ever make it, she's never working another day in her life. By the time Jordan turned 25, he was no longer just that emotional rapper from the neighborhood. He was a movement. His lyrics were quoted in classrooms. Clips of his interviews trended online. Kids called him the one who makes sad songs feel strong. But even with the buzz, the followers, the viral fame, Jordan stayed grounded. Because every time he stepped off stage, he went home to a woman who still asked him, "Have you eaten today? You prayed this morning? Don't forget whose name you carry." Then came the call. A major music festival, one of the biggest in the country, wanted Jordan as their closing headliner. A 30-minute live set. A national broadcast. Over 60,000 people in the arena. Jordan said yes, but under one condition. "I need 5 minutes. At the end. Just for something personal." Behind the scenes, he worked day and night on one track. No one heard it. Not his producers. Not his fans. Not even his closest friends. He recorded it quietly in a small studio downtown, alone, with just his engineer. It was a letter in the form of a song. A memory in every verse. A soft, slow build that held 25 years of love, pain, and silent thank yous. He titled it, "Raised by a Soldier." Meanwhile, he made arrangements. Front row seat for Ms. Ruth Johnson. Limo pickup. Hair appointment covered. A brand new outfit chosen by one of the best stylists in the city. And a quiet message delivered by her son. "Please come, Ma. I know you don't like big crowds, but this one's important." Ruth hesitated. "I have clients on Saturday. I'll reschedule them. You know I don't like all that attention." "It's not for you," Jordan smiled. "It's about you." She finally said yes. The night before the show, Jordan stood in her doorway. She was curling her hair, mumbling about not knowing what shoes to wear. He looked at her, tired but still standing. A little older, a little slower, but still the same woman who once rocked him to sleep humming gospel tunes after working double shifts. He leaned in and kissed her forehead. "You were the stage before I ever had one." She blinked at him, confused, smiling, not knowing that tomorrow, her story would be sung in front of the world. The lights dimmed. The crowd of 60,000 buzzed with anticipation. Phones in the air. Spotlights dancing. Beats still echoing from the artist before him. Then, the screen behind the stage flickered to life. No logos. No sponsors. Just one sentence in handwritten white text on a black screen. "She raised me alone. This is for her." The music began softly. A quiet instrumental. Just a piano and a low heartbeat rhythm underneath. The kind of sound that pulls people in without shouting for their attention. Jordan stepped out. Not in chains or flashy designer. Just a black tee, jeans, and a chain with a tiny gold locket. Inside that locket, a photo of baby Jordan in Ruth's arms. He took a deep breath, then began. She braided hair till her fingers bled. Washed the same shirt so I could look fed. Prayed over bills and broken beds. And still made space for me to dream instead. The crowd was silent. Even the cameras didn't dare cut away. Because this wasn't a performance. This was a testimony. Behind him, the screen lit up again. Not with graphics, but with photos. Real ones. A teenage Ruth holding baby Jordan at a bus stop. A grainy photo of her sleeping on the couch after work. A picture of Jordan's first school award, with Ruth standing proudly in the back, half cropped out of the frame, just like she always was in life. And in the front row, Ruth sat frozen, hand over her mouth, tears on her cheeks, eyes locked on her son. The lyrics continued, raw, powerful, sacred. "You held me down when I had nothing, gave me light when all I saw was gray. And every time I thought of quitting, you reminded me, we don't break, we pray." As the final verse echoed out into the open air, the music faded, and Jordan whispered into the mic, "You didn't get flowers back then, Ma. You didn't get days off. But tonight, you get the world." Then he reached to the side of the stage, grabbed a small velvet box, and walked down into the front row. He knelt, right in front of her, and handed her a set of keys. "You're not working another day. You're not renting another apartment. You're not braiding hair for grocery money anymore. You're going home, to your own home, paid in full. And the beauty studio you always dreamed of? It's yours." The audience stood, not because it was a performance, but because it was real, raw, honest, and holy. Ruth tried to speak, but all she could do was hold him, her grown son on his knees in front of her, and sob into his shoulder. "Thank you," she whispered. "No," he said back. "Thank you. For every year you didn't give up on me." 6 months later, Ruth Johnson opened the doors to her very own hair studio. The sign above the entrance read, "Grace and Glory, by Ruth." And beneath it, in smaller gold letters, just one line. Dedicated to every woman who raised a king with nothing but her hands and her heart. The building was modest. 2 chairs, a coffee machine, a small gospel radio playing in the corner. But it was hers. Every inch of it. And for the first time in her life, she wasn't cleaning someone else's dream. She was living in her own. She still braided hair, not because she had to, but because she wanted to. She said it helped her think, helped her pray. Sometimes, her clients would recognize her from the video. They'd whisper, "Are you the Ms. Ruth?" She would just smile and say, "I'm Jordan's mama." And that was enough. As for Jordan, he kept rising. Albums, tours, magazine covers. But no matter how far he traveled, he always came home. Because for him, home wasn't a place. It was a woman who once whispered, "It's just me and you now. We'll make it." In a documentary released a year later, Jordan was asked, What's been your biggest achievement so far? He smiled. Didn't mention awards. Didn't mention money. Didn't mention the sold-out stadiums. He simply said, "The day I made my mother sit down and rest." Sometimes, the loudest thank you takes 25 years to say. Sometimes, love doesn't come with roses or ribbons. It comes with calloused hands, silent prayers, and empty stomachs so someone else can eat. This story isn't just about a boy who made it. It's about a mother who carried him until he could carry her. If you felt this story deep in your chest, don't scroll away. Subscribe to SoulTwist Stories for more emotional, real, soul-bending narratives. And tell us in the comments, who is your Ruth? Who sacrificed so you could rise? Because somewhere out there, someone's quiet love made you who you are. It's never too late to say, thank you.